Good morning, everyone. Obviously, I am not Nathaniel Lee. He will join us shortly in the program, but we do have our esteemed panel here today, Attorney Milton Grimes, Attorney John Sweeney, Attorney Vanita Banks, and a special guest we have today is Dr. Jude Mamadou. Today's talk discussion will be on COVID-19, the implications of that for our community here in Indianapolis and throughout the country. So without further ado, let's get started, and we'll start with Dr. Jude Mamadou. He is a physician here in Indianapolis. He is an Army veteran, an MD, PhD, and all-around outstanding physician. Dr. Mamadou, please tell us about these vaccines that are on the market now.
Morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Jude Mamadou. I have an MD degree and a PhD in public health. My area of focus is infectious disease epidemiology. I will be discussing the coronavirus vaccine highlights this morning. First slide. First slide. There are about 5 vaccines that are in phase 3 trials. Of course, you have known about Pfizer, Moderna, and 3 other vaccines. Next slide. And Pfizer and Moderna are currently using messenger RNA to produce their vaccine. This is not our usual method of producing vaccine, but the messenger RNA mechanism is not new to us, but it's a new way of producing the vaccine. Next slide. And I know there have been a lot of safety discussions around these vaccines that we are currently about to receive. The truth is that the messenger RNA is not a modified virus, it's not a killed virus. It's just a special protein that is made to have the spikes, like that very spike that is found in COVID-19. And so when you get the injection to your right upper arm, your body will copy that spike, destroy the molecule that helped to produce that spike, and the memory cells will now be ready to recognize a virus that looks like that when you get infected. Next slide. There are some reactions, what we call side effects from these vaccines that were documented during the studies. Some myalgia, and sometimes redness in the area where you get the injection. Next slide. Next slide. Some of the things that I want to talk about this vaccine also is the fact that Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine has been determined to be about 95% effective after 28 days of first. And with regards to Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine, they found out that headache and fatigue were the most common side effect. Next slide. And with regard to Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, it was determined to be about 94% effective. But with regards to severe disease, it was about 100% effective. There were about 30,000 participants, and reported side effects were headache, fatigue, myalgia, arthritis, and pain at the injection site. And I want to say also that these vaccines were effective across all races, age, and gender. And there were African Americans as well as Hispanics represented in this study. Next slide. Currently, these vaccines have been authorized for emergency use and for healthcare personnel. That includes doctors, nurses, and all those who are working in the nursing homes that may be at risk of getting COVID-19, and as well as residents of nursing homes. That concludes my presentation, and I can take any question at this time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mamadou. One of the first questions is, could you clarify the difference between side effects versus adverse events?
All right, side effects are those effects that you get from injecting vaccine to a particular area of your body, like irritation at the site of injection, pain, and of course, also like headache and fatigue. Those are common reactions to vaccinations. But when an adverse event is a more complicated event that occurs as a consequence of vaccination. And none of that were reported in these current vaccines that we're about to receive.
So, so as a community, for a good analogy, so when Attorney Grimes goes to work out and his muscles hurt after going to the gym, that's a side effect.
That is a side effect.
That is a side effect. But if he drops the weight on his foot and breaks it, that's an adverse event.
Yes.
Okay.
Or he starts to get confused. That's an adverse event.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So going to the legal aspects of this, one of the questions we have is, can your employer require you to take the vaccine?
Is that a question for me?
No, it's for Attorney Sweeney or Attorney Grimes or Attorney Banks. Could you?
Yeah, I can. That's uncharted waters because we've never gone through anything like this before. But I would imagine that an employer can make a compelling case to require that all employees be vaccinated, within a timely manner. That is, maybe by the end of the year, because what it does is it affects the workforce. So I would think that an employee who refuses to take the vaccination and then is let go because of his refusal, his or her refusal, and they bring a lawsuit, I would suspect that a judge would weigh what I was just talking about, the inconvenience and his reticence to take it versus the good of the whole organization. And I think that the good of the whole organization would win out in the end.
Okay. Attorney Grimes, do you have any comments on this?
I understand Mr. Sweeney's analysis and reasoning for what he said, but I have a strong belief in individuals' rights and what to do with my own body, and that may conflict with the requirements of my job. I'm just a little hesitant to dive in and compare the two different rights, because I'm dealing with that in a legal matter now with my clients not being given discovery because they're on a murder case, but it seems to affect the minority defendants more than any other group of defendants. So I don't want to get this confused, but I just I have personal reservations about being vaccinated, especially with this rush of producing and manufacturing the vaccine, and my belief that there is a profitized motive in some of the manufacturing and the rush to get to the marketplace. So I just don't have clarity about this vaccine and the safety of it. And I think that I would make a rational argument for an employee who would have some hesitance to be vaccinated until we have more assurance that the vaccine itself is safe. And that the odds are it will prevent the virus. I mean,
Milton, though, but wouldn't it be a prima facie case that the vaccination is safe if the CDC approves it?
Wow, John, I want to believe that would be the prima facie case that we needed, but I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with that, John, because of my my reading, my belief, the syphilis everybody knows about what happened with African Americans who had syphilis back in the day. They didn't tell them they were sick, and they watched it and they benefited from that experiment, the Tuskegee experiment. I recently read or learned somewhere that in the World War II, that because of their concern about mustard gas, they rounded up some 60,000 predominantly 90-some% African-American soldiers around the country and put them in rooms of 15 and 20 and threw the mustard gas canister in there and see what their reaction to mustard gas would be, so that they could have some information to protect the white soldiers in combat. Now, this was done by America back in the 40s. So there's still other things that happen to Native Americans, to people throughout this country. Now, whether the CDC backed those things or not, I don't know, John, but I'm not going to just automatically jump on the horse because the CDC said, hey, you can do so. Because I know the corruption of our organizations with the leaders within those organizations. So I just beg to differ with you about rushing to accept that.
Milton, let me tell you, you are in the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No,
Milton, you are in the majority of people who don't want to rush in. As a matter of fact, in USA Today, it was reported this week that, and I'm quoting, in the September survey, only 32% of Black adults said they would get a vaccine, and that's down from 54% in May. So, most of the people feel like you, Milton. As a matter of fact, I have great respect and reverence for President Obama. When he gets his on TV, it will make me feel a whole lot better about this.
John?
So, Dr. Mamadou, as a military officer, as a physician, you know that the Black community has a very difficult history with vaccines. So what can you add to the community to help alleviate these concerns? And they're very valid concerns.
Well, like Anthony Grimes said, we do have a history where we have been used for experiment in the past. That's the history. In the current times, these particular vaccines that are coming out, we find out that their benefits outweighs the risk. And we are no longer in that situation that we were in 1940s, where we could be used as experiments. I myself, I'm going to get a vaccine, and there are a lot of African Americans that are also that work in FDA, that work in CDC, and are also very positioned to know that this is not just white versus Black vaccine. And one of the good things about this vaccine is that African Americans were represented in the study, and messenger RNA that is being used to make this vaccine does not enter into the DNA of human beings. That is where you can have a major side effect that can result in some other morbidities. So because the messenger RNA does not enter the nucleus and does not alter our DNA, this vaccine is considered very safe, even though we are using a different method, different from what we have used before. But the problem we are having also now is that this conspiracy theory has also become a pandemic. And we want to make sure that African Americans benefit from this vaccine and they don't buy into this conspiracy theory. I can understand that. We do understand the fears of African Americans, but we also don't want that fear to hinder our community from getting vaccinated.
I don't want to just be lumped in a group of whatever the percentage is John mentioned. And when you say conspiracy theory, there's a negativism about that handle that it doesn't offend me, because I'm willing to talk all day about my feelings, but this is just my feelings about how the people are lied to by different branches of government every day. And that ain't no conspiracy theory, that's a fact. I'm reading Obama's The Promised Land now. I just started a couple of days ago, but I can't put it down because he's admitting some of the politics that are played with people's lives, essentially. I mean, I can see that from my other things that I read and talked about. So I just, Doctor, have a hesitance before I step in and drink the Kool-Aid to know all of the information. How many people have died from this experiment? How many experiments have there been? Just what's the protocol? What's happening here? I'm not taking your word or anyone else's word that this is good for me to take if I can find out more.
Attorney
Yeah,
Banks,
I think-
you want to get in? Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to. I've got a lot of thoughts as I've been listening to this riveting discussion this morning. I think we must follow the science and that we have to listen to professionals like the doctor who, is an expert on infectious diseases. I think that also we have to look at the history of African Americans being subjected to foremost the Tuskegee experiments back in the 30s and understand that those that clinical trial, if you will, lasted from 1932 up to 1972. And we have to deal with that history, and we have to deal with that hesitancy that the African American communities have with respect to the medical system and healthcare in general, and specifically with respect to vaccines. That history is there. We have to acknowledge that it exists, and we have to deal with that history, and we have to encourage people to talk about it. And we also have to look at what's happening today. We have to look at the laws and regulations and reforms that were made as a result of those Tuskegee experiments. And we have to become knowledgeable about the process today. As a result of attorney Fred Gray, the legendary Fred Gray, past president of the National Bar Association and legendary civil rights leader who represented Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. and the participants, many of the participants in the Tuskegee experiment. As a result of his lawsuit filed, Pollard versus United States, there was a $10 million settlement, probably one of the highest at that time, to compensate the survivors and families of those that had been mistreated by the government, in these experiments. But as a result of that dark history, many reforms, legislation has been passed to prevent that from happening again. And Milton, no, we don't expect African Americans to just buy into those representations, but we have to look today at the science. We have to listen to people like our doctor on the call, Dr. Fauci, and other leaders in the public health and medical community. We have to educate the public, our public, African American and Brown and Native American communities based on the science and based on facts. There's been some assertions that, for example, the vaccine was developed too fast. It's my understanding, and I'm hearing that because of technological advances, that cut down the time that it took to bring the vaccine, to fruition. That now we have independent and transparent and open safety monitoring boards that will be considering as early as next week, Doctor, whether to approve emergency use authorization for the vaccine. And then also, we know that the data will be published in, peer-reviewed journals. And so I think it's important for members of the medical community, we've got to continue to have this holistic conversation about our history, as well as the scientific methods that are being utilized today to ensure that we don't result in a paradox, an unfortunate paradox where the communities that may need this vaccine the most won't take it because they don't feel trust in the system. So it's going to take a full-blown education campaign where we will have respected professionals like our doctor today on our program actually at the table as this vaccine process moves forward.
Renita, I appreciate all that you said, and I don't disagree with what you said. And I'm not attacking the doctor if it seems like that. And I know I tend to start directing things at people rather than what they're saying.
I hope my comments didn't suggest that, but go ahead.
What I'm questioning is my right to question the process that the doctor is coming to us with. And
I think every American does have the right to question the process.
Yeah.
And to feel comfortable ultimately, with whether to, proceed, forward.
Let me show my transparency. I'm a brother who's afraid of needles no matter what they're for. So first of all,
let me say this, Milton. Milton, let me say this, that I think the days of the Tuskegee experiment and other experiments using African Americans as guinea pigs is over because of lawyers who have brought this to the consciousness of the nation. As a matter of fact, let me quote Dr. Howard Bachner. He's the editor-in-chief of JAMA. That's the Journal of American Medical Association. It's the top recognized peer review journal in the profession. He says, we have to really get to a place where we can reckon with the past wrongs and effectively communicate this to the community, and he's talking about the African American community. He said, it means investing in holding intimate conversation around where we've gone wrong and why we have to move past Tuskegee and think seriously about how African Americans engage and participate in clinical trials, which is exactly what Bonita was saying. It's communication, but I think those days are over because of the lawyers and others
Doctors
who have brought it to the nation's attention what has been done to us.
And with respect to the issue regarding employment litigation, we're going to see a host of litigation filed around COVID-19, once the dust settles from who's ultimately accountable from the federal government on down for decisions that were made or indecision in connection with the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost. And if we don't change course, will continue to be a loss. But with respect to employment law and litigation, we can expect to see litigation if we can expect to see litigation. In fact, I found it interesting when the requirement of temperature checks before you enter workplaces was instituted. That requirement could be viewed as an invasion of privacy because you're standing there at the gate, right? And if you don't pass the temperature check, then you're going to be turned away and sent home. So the question, one of the biggest issues in these cases is going to be whether or not the public or the employers, whether the public health interest of the employees is going to trump, if you will, the privacy interest the individual. And so those are going to be very, very interesting cases to watch as we move forward.
Well, guys, I'm going by 100 years, it seemed like, of trials in the courtroom where experts come in and they're using a study where they've collected the data and they're now putting forth a theory, and the study was done by someone in their garage with 15 people, and now all of a sudden they have a theory. And I'm not saying that's happening here with the coronavirus work, but all I'm saying is I would like for someone that I trust, or an organization, and that we, the public, know all that's been done to get what appears to be a rush to vaccine. That's all.
I think those are excellent points, Milton. And we're looking at all the different facets of this. This is such a rich discussion this morning, as usual. And so I think we're going to see a public service campaign like we've never seen before, or at least comparable to that we saw with respect to voting and the power of exercising our voices by voting. I think we're going to see something equally as large as that, across all media channels. And I think that we're going to see that coming from, leaders in our communities, a faith-based community, across all segments of community that people trust. I think we're going to see athletes and others. We've already seen President Obama, 3 presidents state that they will voluntarily and publicly take the vaccine. And so I think, and I would thank you, John, for that quote, that everything, is being done, and I understand, Milton, to make this a transparent and open process.
Let me get Dr. Mamadou in here, because what are the Black doctors doing to alleviate these concerns and to tell the public and the African American community the information that they require to be confident and comfortable in taking these vaccines? All of the attorneys here are members of the National Bar Association, the NBA. The counterpart is the National Medical Association. What are you all doing to help our community understand what's required, the data behind this vaccine, and if it is in fact safe for us to use?
So thank you so much. I want to first of all answer Mr. Grimes, and I want to say that the word conspiracy theory might be wrong. Individual reservation is probably better in terms of this vaccine, which I can understand the reason why everybody has a reservation. I've seen physicians that said they're not going to be the first person. Even white physicians, they say, I'm going to wait, Jude, until after you've got the vaccine, and I'll see what happens to you. So we have all these reservations everywhere. So it's not just African Americans that have reservation about this vaccine, but some people do. And now they are saying that this kind of reservation has also become a pandemic. Now, to answer your question, the reason I appear in this show today is also to help validate some of the concerns that people have, and to also let African Americans know that we don't want to use our past to prevent us from getting the benefit of this vaccine. And I know people say that it's very fast, but don't forget that there is an independent data monitoring board that are separate from Pfizer and Moderna monitoring unit. These are the people that says these vaccines are safe for human use, even if it is shortened the time that is took to produce this vaccine. All the side effects so far that has been recorded are routine side effects that we see with vaccination. So to answer your question, a lot of African American physicians were going to our communities to let them know, going to churches to let them know that as far as we know, this vaccine is safe for us. And don't forget that this is emergency use. they will continue to monitor post-launch side effect of this vaccine. If there's anything discovered, it will also be reported. So I think it's good to know that the current side effect that we know is not even the Pfizer or Moderna that reported that. Is an independent data monitoring board that said this is what they found with this vaccine. As a consequence, this vaccine is safe for human use. And the other thing we want to know is that we do have a past that is making us scared, and everybody has the right to be scared. But don't forget, African Americans have a seat right now on the table. We know what's going on. I have a PhD in public health. I specialize in infectious disease. So, and I know that this vaccine will not be pushed out with the intent to hurt our community, because everybody has some fear because the vaccine does not meet the timing. However, this vaccine will never be approved or be allowed to be authorized in an emergency way if FDA knows that it's going to hurt a particular segment of the society. So I'm saying that to say that I will encourage us to continue to look at the side effects that are being reported and the people that are represented in this study. And the good thing is that African Americans were represented, African American data were collected, and as well as Hispanic and everybody else. And I think our individual reservation should be addressed every day so that you can prep yourself to get ready to get this vaccine, because the morbidity of COVID is way more than the side effect of this vaccine, that as far as we know at this point.
So we've been joined by our fearless leader, Nathaniel Lee.
How you doing?
Good morning.
I got a question for you, Doctor. Here's my concern, and mornings, everyone, my outstanding guests and hosts. Doc, here's the problem. When manufacturers such as Pfizer and Moderna produce these products, we never, as trial lawyers, get the actual results of their investigation until lawsuits are filed. So in other words, there were some adverse reactions, but we don't know what they were. They don't publicize those. And so what are the likely consequences? We know about the soreness, potential fevers, but what are the additional side effects that you've learned that they've disclosed yet concerning these vaccinations?
So what we worry about is adverse events of vaccines, such as GBS, what they call Guillain-Barré syndrome, and Travers maladies. These are major adverse events of vaccination, which you can also get from viral infection or bacterial infection. None of these major adverse events has been reported with Moderna and Pfizer. However, Pfizer, during their studies, reported that they had headache and fatigue, which is just feeling tired all the time. Those were the commonest side effects reported with Pfizer vaccine. With regards to Moderna, they reported headache, arthralgia, which is like joint pain. They reported some fatigue, muscle ache, and pain at the site of injection. Also, this can be found with flu vaccination, MMR, and the other vaccinations that we know we have been taking for a long time. So what we worry about is adverse reaction, which we never, or adverse event, which has not been reported with this vaccination, at least. And then, one of the requirements for these vaccines to be authorized is that this study has to go beyond 2 months. And after 2 months, they were able to collect this data. And lawyers have not laid hands on the data, and they can't, what is released so far. And the other thing I said that is very important about this, Lawyer Lee, is the fact that an independent body that was mandated by NIH called, these are data monitoring boards. They are the ones that are looking at these side effects, not just the pharmaceutical companies. Those are the guys looking at the side effects and also reporting them so that the pharmaceutical companies don't have any way of hiding the adverse events or side effects.
My concern is who's on those boards? Who elected them? Who selected them? Who put them on those boards? Those boards, sometimes we have a new board here, or in addition to the police commission board, an experienced lawyer of 40-some years, a lot of police cases. Turns out he's got a lot of police cases representing the police. So is he really representing the public on that board? So to present board's approval and this approval and that approval. Who are they?
Well, you know, Milton, and the rest of the panel, let me interject this. And Milton's skepticism and the African American community skepticism is well placed. And we all say that it started with the syphilis experiments, and it started way before that, during slavery. In preparing for this panel discussion, I always like to bring a historical perspective. I found out that the father of modern gynecology in the United States is a guy named Dr. James Marion Sims. And you know what he did? He conducted experiments on female slaves, patients, to test new gynecological methods without providing anesthesia. That's almost like Mengele in the Nazi concentration camps. Also, the risk of contracting tuberculosis and other infectious diseases were used to historically justify segregation, keep Black people segregated. So these things are passed on in our rich history of oral history, which goes way back to Africa. You know, the oral history of our people, and it's passed on. It has made its way to this generation, and that's why Milton, myself, and every other person on this panel are skeptical, and we should look at this with a jaundiced eye, because you have to show me. I'm not just going to take your word, and I fully understand what Milton is saying, position he's taking, but we have to balance it with what Vanita is saying and what I'm saying. You know, we're coming into the modern world. I just wanted to lay a foundation that it didn't just start with the syphilis experiment. It's always been in this country.
That is so true. And as a result of that very, very dark history, and lawyers like Attorney Fred Gray and others, the massive reforms have occurred. And Dr. Mamadou, I understand that in addition to the submission for approval on an emergency use authorization basis to the Independent Data Safety Monitoring Board, that there's another safety board that the request is going to as well. I was wondering if you could speak about that. And I think that Milton raised a great question. Are the identities of these board members made public?
Dr. Mamadou?
Yes. Once FDA approved it for emergency use, ACIP, which is another independent body that monitor vaccine practices, is called ACIP. They are the one that will now vote and determine who are the people that will get the vaccine first, and they will continue to vote to determine who gets it next. So it's not just one board that approves this vaccine for use. And again, people's individual fears and stuff like that are well appreciated, and people should voice out their fears because of our past experiences. Having said that, though, many of these boards are littered with people that are very smart in science, medical scientists that are proving that this vaccine, as far as we know, that is why it's an emergency use, is safe for human use. ICIP will be the one to say, okay, we see what FDA says. FDA has approved this vaccine. We're going to look at the data also and see if this vaccine, whatever they have said is true. They look at the data, they say, okay, we can approve this vaccine for emergency use. And then they approve that and they determine who uses it. Then the question is, this is emergency use. There is a continuous monitoring unit that will continue to monitor the adverse events post-launch to see if there are other things that are coming up after people have started taking this vaccine. But what we are saying is that because COVID-19 is decimating African-American community, we are hoping that as much as possible, as much fear as we have, we will try to follow science when it comes to this matter, and to also trust the fact that in this modern time, nobody can be 100% sure that this vaccine is not going to be like a Tuskegee experiment that we will know of. And hopefully, if we can alleviate these fears, we are hoping that African American communities will be able to surrender for this vaccine, because as you are aware, COVID-19 has decimated our community because of our comorbidities and other things that play into our health.
Doctor, could you distinguish between, we hear about, quote, side effects that you stated relative to the two vaccines, the pain at the injection site, the fatigue, et cetera, muscle aches, et cetera. Could you distinguish between, quote, side effects and adverse events, and how that's all factored into, quote, my words, long-term effects of the vaccine?
Yes. So adverse events are what I would say, the major things that happen to an individual, for example, from vaccination. It has been reported with some vaccines, like the flu vaccines and stuff like that. And what we worry about is the GBS, what they call Guillain-Barré syndrome. That is where your cells attack your nerve cells, and then it can result in what they call muscle weakness and paralysis. That has not been seen with this vaccine, both Moderna and Pfizer. And also there is also this what they call transverse myelitis, where the spinal cord has some kind of inflammation. That has not been determined with both Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. However, side effects, like we have also seen in so many other vaccinations, have been reported. For example, Moderna reported that most people that took this vaccination during their trial, some of them reported headaches, some reported joint pain, some reported fatigue. That is, just to be tired after the vaccination, and not for a long time. And other people reported redness and pain at the injection site, because this vaccine goes to your upper arm, and those areas have been reported to be slightly inflamed after the injection. Those are side effects. What we are also, I myself am looking for very closely, or I'm looking at, is where there's some adverse events that I don't know, because I know I'm going to take this vaccine. As you are aware, I'm a physician, I'm also a military physician. And so if I don't take it in my job, I have to take it in the armed forces. So we don't have any record yet of any adverse events, but don't forget, the same adverse events that we are talking about can be found from viral infection. Like, for example, if you get the flu, you can get what they call GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome. There have been reported cases of people that get the flu, not the vaccination, that had the GBS. So none of the major adverse effects have been reported, but side effects, like we have always had with vaccinations, have been reported with both vaccines that have been approved.
Doctor,
Producer, let's take one call, please.
pardon, I'm sorry.
Producer, can we take one call?
Okay. I like to ask some questions. Is this a live, doctor?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I like to ask him. This sounds like the nuclear missiles they was sending off in Russia and China, and I think it's just hitting us. And it sounds like the same effect as that effect has. So if somebody could study that, then they'll probably get the solution for COVID virus, which it ain't none.
Thank
So
you.
ask them about that for me, okay?
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Does anybody have a response to that question?
I couldn't understand the question that well.
I think it was more of a commentary as opposed to a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Attorney Grimes. You were going to say something before the caller.
Doctor, you may not be the one to answer this question, and it sounds unfair to ask you, but what's the net profit of the manufacturer who gets there first on this vaccine?
That's for me?
Yes, Dr. Mamadou.
Yeah, so of course, we know that the United States has deposited billions of dollars for the vaccination, and Britain is paying for it, EU is paying for it. There is always profit when it comes to vaccination. Everybody knows that, because nobody makes vaccine for free. So they are going to make money out of this. But the issue we need to realize that we are facing a pandemic. In a pandemic, everybody has a chance to die suddenly. And because this is a pandemic, we are doing whatever it takes to pose a major resistance to this virus. And so at this point, to be frank with you, Attorney Grant, we want the pharmaceutical companies to make money, fine, because they need to be in business. But we also want them to step up and help us to develop a way to fight this pandemic and bring it to a close. That is the goal right now.
Let me ask you this, Doctor, and I'm sure the listeners and viewers want to hear the answer to this. When do you anticipate us getting back to our normalcy, our traveling, our getting together with family without the threat of contracting this virus? What do you see? Is it at the end of the year of 2021, middle of 2021? What do you think?
So that is a very good question. And to be frank with you, I know you are aware that getting this vaccination doesn't mean that we are going to abandon all the necessary precautions that we have been told to continue to do. And to be frank with you, that will be predicated on people cooperating to take this vaccine. And the more people that take this vaccine, the earlier we can get out of this problem. But if we have a lot of people that refuses to take this vaccine, I will put a number. It will take up to 2022 if people don't. If it takes a lot of people time to think about this vaccine, that means then the virus will be around for a long time. But if we all take this vaccine and agree to take it, I'm thinking that by the end of next year, 2021, the fall of 2021, this vaccine could be, we will be able to at least reduce the transmission rate, and then people can begin to go about their businesses. However, if we don't have a good number of people respond, and because nobody will be forced to take it, this could drag out for a long time.
Doctor, do you believe that we're doing the right thing now in football, in college, high school, and the pros, and all of these athletic events that are continuing to try to go on? You think they should wait? What do you think is happening now?
So quite frankly, I think, to be frank, as you are aware, the virus has exploded now. And that is because some of those precautions we were advised to take, social distancing, wearing a mask, has been disregarded. And you know, you can't wear mask and play all those games, and you can't wear mask. You can wear mask at the stadium, but if you are going to play sports, you're not going to put that mask on. Quite frankly, I think what would have helped us is obeying the CDC guidelines first, get this virus under control before we go about doing everything now that we're doing. Because we did not obey that, it's almost like we're going to walk our way back to control this virus, which has not been the intention of our CDC. So to answer your question, we have not listened very well. And it seems to me that it's still going to be a big problem as time goes on, because if people don't listen now that the vaccine is coming out still, then we will prolong this vaccine in the society. And a lot of the things that we are doing, some of it we are not supposed to be doing because they become super spreader events, and as you know.
So one of the reasons why our institutions and people aren't listening is because our institutions have been somewhat politicized. Attorney Sweeney pointed out an article this week concerning this in the LA Times. Attorney Sweeney, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. There was an article, and I'm trying to pull it up, about just how close we came to the brink of
Losing our democracy.
Losing our democracy. That Trump's people were following the playbook of every dictator over the last 200 years. And I just wanted to bring it up to as a warning so that this never happens again, to elect someone who most people knew because Hillary Clinton got the majority of votes in 2016, but didn't win the Electoral College votes. But I just wanted to bring it up to expose the frailty and the tenuous nature of democracy. It's a living, breathing apparatus, and it has to be nourished and protected. And we came very, very close, had Trump been reelected, to going into an authoritarian rule, which would have destroyed our country. Yeah, and that was the gravamen of the Los Angeles Times article.
And one of the organizations that's listed in there that was politicized is the CDC, which directly affects what the topic today, this COVID vaccine. Dr. Mamadou?
Yes, again, we all know about the political situation in our modern times. But what we want to also take note of is the fact that we do not want that to blindfold African Americans about the truth study that we have been able to discover, or what we know now about these vaccines. The purpose of me appearing today is to let you know that not only that I'm taking the vaccine, so far as a physician, a medical scientist, I've looked at the side effects that have been reported, not just by the pharmaceutical companies, but by the independent data monitoring board that were set up by NIH to look at the safety of these vaccines. And so far, there is nothing that would preclude me from taking the vaccine. And I'm going to continue to encourage African Americans, Hispanics, and other people that what we know now is enough for us to move ahead and take this vaccination. The politics will always be there. It doesn't matter who is in power. There will always be politics. And we are very much aware that it's a little bit more than usual. But to say there will be no politics, no matter who wins, is just it's not possible. So to answer your question, the goal is to answer everybody's questions. What fears do you have about this vaccine? Because what I noticed is that, like a lot of my friends who are even doctors, they say, I'm not going to take, I'm going to wait. I said, what are you waiting for? I want to make sure that when you take it, your arm don't fall off. I said, okay. I mean, that's a reasonable expectation. However, nobody wants what COVID is doing. COVID is disease that is causing a morbidity as never before. So
we've got the break time for the from the producer. 30-second closing comments from our legal panel. Attorney Grimes.
Yes. Thankfully, the doctor agrees with me in that transparency, for lack of a better word, is essential. And I just want to know what I'm putting in my body. And I want all the information I can to know about what I am putting in my body. And I trust what we have now in telling me that.
Thank you. Attorney Sweeney, 30 seconds.
Yes. We as a people are justified in questioning the efficacy of this vaccine because of our long history, which goes back to slavery. So we are correct and justified in questioning it, but I think with this vaccine that we are past that. We are looking at it with a jaundiced eye, but I think that if the CDC approves it or has approved it, and that I think that we should maybe take a look at it, but I think we need to go on and follow suit and not lag behind other community and vaccinating everyone in our community.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Dr. Attorney Banks.
We have to follow the science. We, as professionals, both medical and legal, and across the board, leaders have to get into our communities to educate our communities, to listen to concerns regarding the past unfortunate history, and move forward to ensure that our communities who most need this virus have the information that they need to feel comfortable in taking this virus. And I'm hoping that next week we can continue this conversation as more information comes in after the independent review board, and that we can also evolve the conversation that we commenced regarding, and this is an Atlantic article entitled, President Trump Proved That Authoritarians Can Get Elected in America.
Well, thank you all. I think Nathaniel Lee was here for a few moments and ducked out, but thank you all on behalf of him and the show, and have a good week, and we'll look forward to the discussion next week.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,
you.
Sonia and Doctor
Thank you.
and colleagues.